First, let me thank you, Prime Minister, Storing, President of Liberia, Prime Minister of Tanzania, and my dear friend and brother, Rasha, and all the members of the GAP. It's nice to be here together at Rockefeller Foundation, where I used to work, actually, so I'm delighted to be back here.
Home.
First and foremost, your point is that, I think Ajay said it, development is about dignity, right? And there's no dignity when you don't have electricity. You know, you take a look at Africa today. You got 3 people, 16% of global population, 3% of the global electricity access, only 6% of the global energy access. How do you do that? Just before we came in here, I was talking to 2 folks working for GAP about should we make a case for why we should invest? Actually, we were just talking about that in energy. I say absolutely yes, because as Ajay said, energy is all about how you actually grow economies. It's how you actually invest in industries. It's how you actually create jobs, right? So you cannot really grow global economy without energy. In any case, with Africa just being 2% of that, 3% of that, it means Africa's participation in the global economy will continue to be low. And Africa cannot be at the bottom of the global value chain. You cannot industrialize in the dark. You can't grow in the dark. You can't do that. And so this is fundamental to Africa's growth, development, competitiveness globally. Now, when it comes to the issue of what the numbers are, it's alarming. You know, we have today, the numbers we use to pan around is that it's 600 million people without access to electricity. I think those numbers are actually quite on the low end, because with COVID, rising inflation, with a lot of poverty, many more people that are actually using electricity are now using coal and other things. So that number has actually gone up quite significantly. So the issue that we must therefore say is, what must we do? We need a quantum leap. This is why I'm so excited with my partnership together with Ajay. Both of us met and we said, look, we're going to look really silly here. There's nothing new about getting electricity done. It's all about making sure we have scale, we have the resources, we have the partnership, we have the governments, and we then say, without electricity, it's nothing. Look, he was talking about the issue of migration. You know, you take a look at insects, okay? Insects, you turn off this light and and put on light. Where do the insects go? They know better, right? They go to where there's light. It's the same with migration. You know, people don't have electricity, they're going to move to where there is electricity and where there's better quality of life. And so your question is, why hasn't it happened? It hasn't happened because, for many reasons. First is that we have not prioritized energy in the national plannings for many countries, right? So that's the first thing. So the amount of budget devoted to energy is actually quite low. And second is the fact that a lot of the infrastructure are quite dilapidated, and we have not actually done it. Most of it is on energy generation. So for example, you take the UNGA, for example. Grand UNGA, we've been talking about it forever. Now that alone is about 70,000 megawatts. If you actually got it done, then of course, we will have solved this problem. But the other part is, even if we have the power generation, Ajay, it's how do you evacuate the power? I'm just coming in from from Angola, where they have 5.2 gigawatts of power. But they're stranded with 1.5 gigawatts. They can't evacuate it because of what? There's no transmission line. And so we have to therefore invest a lot in transmission line. Now, I remember also the importance of distribution line. I went to Kenya a couple of years ago, and we went to a particular project where we called Last Mile Connectivity Project. And there's a lady, as we were going in, her name was Grace, which happens to be the name of my wife, but she was not my wife. So we were walking, and somebody asked and said, and this is the point, I'm just trying to use it to reinforce the point that Ajay made. He said, do you know Dr. Adesina? She said, no. Do you know African Development Bank? She said, no. All I know was that we never used to have electricity, and now we do. And that's what we are talking about here, is putting together an alliance, not of flags, not of institutions. You know, all of you around here are equally as important as Ajay and I. So both in terms of governments, in terms of multilateral development, bilateral agencies, and also philanthropic agencies and all of that. Now, 2 more things about why this has not happened. It's just capital. Just capital. I mean, raising capital in Africa is several times more expensive than any other part of the world. And so if you look globally, we have in private, you're doing your private sector lab, you know, in Africa, Africa is about 5% of total private investments going into energy. And so we have to make sure that we have more concessional financing. We have to make sure we bring that weighted cost of capital down. We have to make sure also, and the governments are here, and part of the big reason why the private sector aren't going in there is just because the policy and the regulatory environment, tariff structure don't make sense for investors to do that. So it's a whole range of things. But one thing I would say is this, that the power of our collective is going to solve this problem. You know, if you mentioned the New Deal on energy in your question, when we were saying, when we launch a New Deal, progress has been made, by the way. That New Deal was launched in 2016. What happened? The percentage of Africans that have access to electricity increased from 37% to 52%, right? So a lot. We connected, a collective we, 92 million households. Now we've got to connect 114 million more households. That's about 448 million people. So what we are talking about here will do 300 million. That's about almost 64, 65% of that, and that's why we need to work together. Just to follow up on the point that was raised by Ajay, we have to think big about the money and think seriously about the money. This is going to require at least $190 billion to give Africa universal access to electricity. That's the number we're talking about. Okay, I'm saying universal access to electricity. So how we actually raise that capital and leverage the financing that we have is the critical thing. And so if you take the concessional financing part of it, blended finance is going to be very, very important. Ajay mentioned IDA. We also have the African Development Fund. So Prime Minister, financing those two vehicles, concessional financing, is very important. For us, for example, we will need $25 billion. Ajay probably wants $200 billion, but I'm pretty modest with him, so I'll take that.
I agree. I call it ambitious.
The other point I wanted to say is just what we can do easily about this is the SDRs. And let me make the point. You see, the SDRs, when we started, we said there has to be rechartering of SDRs to Multilateral Development Bank. We took the lead on that with the Inter-American Development Bank, and we came up with a framework which allowed the SDR rechartering to be at least 4 times. And when I talked to Ajay, we think directly or indirectly, maybe it can even be 8 times. Now, here's the number. If we actually had $40 billion of SDR rechartering to MDBs, with our AAA ratings, right? If we get 5 leverage out of that, that's $200 billion. That is a hybrid capital. It's a perpetual thing you have inside your... You can leverage that every single year. That solves the problem. And so I think, Ajay, what I would like to say is that, because we've been talking to Kristalina, but I think moving beyond that is actually to be bold here and say, why can't we have SDR to deal with power issue in Africa? Why can't we? You know, because we know we can deliver more than $200 billion using that in Africa every single year. The last thing that I just want to say is to thank the President of Tanzania, Her Excellency President Samia Suluhu Hassan, because when we mentioned this to her in Paris, together with Prime Minister Story, when we were there for the clean cooking, she's very passionate about clean cooking. I am very passionate about clean cooking. I didn't start using glasses because I got smart. I started using glasses as a kid because I grew up cooking with my mother cooking with charcoal, and that's cannot be. We still have almost 900 million women without access to clean cooking. So the things we take for granted in developed countries, cooking a decent meal, not having to die from it. Why must we allow something like that to go on? So part of the thing, Damilola is sharing the thing together with all of you, some of the members of the work. We are committed, in addition to electricity, to making sure that we have to connect at least 130 million women to access for clean cooking every single year. And that's the two things. And we have said, Prime Minister Story was talking about it, we've committed from the African Development Bank $2 billion to the clean cooking agenda. So add that to $2.1 billion, that's $4 billion. All we need is $4 billion. So let's not forget the needs of women who actually have to, we lose today, Julia, let me speak for them. We lose today 300,000 women in Africa from the effect of secondary cooking. Secondary smoke. And 300,000 kids dying for a basic thing like that. As a world, we are better than that. We must hold ourselves accountable to decent living And we think that this joint effort, which we have introduced together with myself and Ajay and all of the Raj, let me also thank the Global Energy Partnership because, and also all of the partners, because Raj and their team, and this is why he's not going to cut you off because I want to thank him. So,
this is.
yeah, no, but I want to thank you for the support that you've given us. So thank you very much.
How, please, in 6 years?
We've done stuff in the past. The bank has connected 120 million people to electricity in the past 10 years. So it can be done, but this is a quantum jump. That's the point Arkeen's making.
Yes.
Why I talk about partnership, the second part of it is capital. Partnership is because we need governments. Some are here at the table. Many more will be at the Tanzania summit. One of the biggest challenges is regulatory policy clarity around how to get power distributed, managed, and generated. That's the point he was making about utilities and the like. The second big, and of course for the private sector to invest side by side, if you don't have regulatory policy clarity, you will take your money and go elsewhere. That's how simple it is. So we do need that. But the second part of it also has to do with people like us working better together, which is what our working groups are trying to do. And remember, small things. If our procurement standards are different in Tanzania, and the Prime Minister of Tanzania is trying to implement a project where we are both financing, he has to deal with two sets of things. If he had so many people available to deal with two sets of things, he would be dealing with them already. And therefore, the need for us to become simplified is mission critical to this game. The third aspect of this is people like GIAP and Damilola and SE for All. Right now, and Andy, where's Andrew? He's sitting here. Why are these folks important? They're important because of three things. One, they bring concessional capital, truly concessional, of course. So does IDA. I'll come to that in a minute. But two, they bring on-the-ground expertise and knowledge and the ability to create convenings, which are very important. And three, they care deeply and think long-term about a topic. They are not focused on getting things done in 3 months and 6 months and 1 year. They are urgency, but what they're really thinking about is, where's the 5-year game? Where's the puck going through? I can skate there. That's why these guys are so important. IDA is important because of this. You heard Raj, or I think the Prime Minister talk about how much money was required. We're going to have to get about 20-odd billion out of IDA. IDA is a remarkable resource for Africa, and it leverages every dollar 4 times. And we're about 30 to 40% of the money goes out as grants. The rest is highly concessional. It's got 20, 30, 40-year paybacks. That's the kind of stuff he does, and we do. We need that to happen. But that's only one part of it. The other part of it is going to be the private sector, and there's your alarm going. And the third part of it, which is important, is there's going to be, governments are going to have to put up money. If they had the money to put up, they would have done it already. They're going through a difficult time. So one of the things we've struck as a deal with the IMF is their RST and the SDRs coming in. While we try and figure out if it can ever be used as hybrid capital for us, we've struck a deal with them. We will go to a country and say, we're putting money in, let's say, $1 billion into Tanzania tomorrow as the two banks. We need the private sector to bring $500 million. We'll work that, but we need the government of Tanzania to put up $1 billion to fix utilities and so on and connect the grid regionally. Where will that money come from? The IMF is willing to step in if they have a program with that country to extend a fiscal headroom credit for renewable energy. They can't finance projects, but they can finance generic policy and change reforms. That partnership is going to be critical to where we're going. That's where we're going.